Welcome to the Real Buffs podcast. This is our inaugural episode, however you say that word. We are going to be diving into our favorite movies, discuss the history behind them, what we love about them. This is our initial podcast, like I said. So we decided that we are going to dive into The Exorcist. Before we dive into that, though, allow me to introduce myself. I'm one of your hosts, Charlie. And with me is my co-host, Matt. Matt, why don't you give a little introduction?
Yes, sir. I am Matt. Charlie and I decided to start this podcast because we go probably 10 years back now to where we used to just sit there and watch all sorts of movies and stuff like that and just deep passion of movies. And so why not get together, chat about all things movies? And like he said, we're going into The Exorcist because it is the 50th anniversary of this beloved horrifying film.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were talking about initially doing this a couple months ago when we got our discussions going, I kind of had an idea of like what movies we want to start with, but we were both in kind of a weird limbo period. Matt was moving and did not even have any of his stuff to really get diving into this. I had a lot going on with work and actually just came back from my honeymoon myself. So yeah, it ended up being the perfect time, and we're actually releasing this episode near the end of spooky season, which is partly the reason why we wanted to do this episode too. It just fits right in with the season. Also, though, this is the 50th anniversary of The Exorcist. It actually came out in 1973, though it didn't come out around spooky season. It actually came out. It was a December Christmas release. So happy holidays going to see this movie back in 1973.
Nothing quite says, let's get in the spirit of Jesus quite like a demonic possession.
I mean, well, listen, let's be real. This movie is very, very pro-Catholic. So, I mean, if you want to go there, it actually kind of is a perfect Christian movie. Just, maybe not the vibes of Christmas. That's all. Not any of that whimsical feeling. That's for damn sure.
I didn't walk away feeling good in my stomach. No.
No, you didn't. I mean, I certainly walked away thinking like, wow, maybe I should go get a crucifix right now and just see what happens. You never know. But anyways, yeah, we're diving into The Exorcist. This is one of my favorite horror films. So I'm really excited to talk about this film. One note, another reason too, before we dive into that, I forgot to mention another reason why we chose this movie this year is actually director William Friedkin passed away in August. Sadly, obviously lived a long, great life, had a very successful career. One of the great directors of the 70s and just amazing in this film. And the film he did for this French Connection, which is an awesome film as well. So now, while we're diving into it, Matt, where were you when you first saw The Exorcist?
Oh, God, dude, I was young. I was like 11 years old in my house, and it happened to be, it was like on HBO or something like that. And I had just got done watching A Nightmare on Elm Street for the very first time. And I was like, yeah, dude, horror movies. Hell yeah, let's do this. And so I threw this movie on, and 11-year-old me was like, fuck this. This is terrifying. And I'd watched the whole thing, but to me, it kind of stuck out to me as probably the scariest movie I had ever watched. And I think part of it's not, now that I've watched it a bunch of times since then. However, I can very much see 11-year-old me still hiding in there, thinking in the back of his head how this was very much like the scariest thing I've watched at this time, because we'll dive into like the special effects, but they still very much held up. And it was just one of those things where you're awake by yourself as teenagers do. You don't go to bed until like 2-3 a.m. and that's like the devil's hour, and it's dark in your house, and one of those things.
I mean, 11 is a little young. I will say this, like,
I had no parents supervision.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen my fair share of horror films young. I mean, probably, I saw The Nightmare on Elm Street, or A Nightmare on Elm Street, way too young. I saw Halloween way too young, and I saw It probably way too young. This one wasn't one that I've seen that young, but this was probably, I'm not gonna lie, like that's probably one of the more fucked up ones to see at a young age is this one.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So is this what explains, what everything that's going on with you mentally, Matt, is because of this movie? Can we trace it back to
My
that?
entire childhood trauma could be traced back to being unsupervised and getting to watch The Exorcist at such a young age.
It makes sense. It makes sense when you look back at a lot of different things. Yeah, I was a little bit older than you, but it's funny. We probably, if you were 11, like just thinking about both of our respective ages, we probably saw it around the same time.
Probably.
Though we had different movie experiences. I saw it when I was about 14. So I don't know if you remember this, but for a brief period when back in 2001, they did re-release this film in the theaters as a director's cut. Though I was 14 and I was still a little too young to buy a ticket back then. R-rated movie.
They actually cared
17.
a little bit more back then about how
Yeah.
old you were going into a movie, which is funny.
I know, right? Like it was one of those things, but like it was a different world. It was, well, I guess at this point it was post 9/11, but anyways, digress. It was still like a different world. There was just more of a communal movie going experience because we didn't have streaming or individual devices to watch this on all the time at our fingertips at every moment. So yeah, I got to the theater and actually me and my friend at the time, we snuck into it. I honestly forget. I wish I knew the movie we bought the ticket for and how we snuck into it. But here's the thing I remember about this. It's one of the most vivid movie going experiences I ever had. Just leading up to it, I can remember exactly what happened before we went in because we tried sneaking in. One of the ushers caught us. He was kind of a younger dude, and he was just like, "All right, like you guys can go in, but listen, like this movie is." He's like, "I've seen it. It's messed up," and I'm like, "Okay, cool."
Sweet.
I mean, and you're 14, like at that age, you're trying to be as brave as possible and that sort of thing, but you're probably really scared. And I definitely was scared. And to this day, this is the scariest film going experience, like in the movie theaters that I have had to date. And, it's funny looking back, like there was a few films during this time that were probably like two of the scariest. This and The Ring. Why? Weirdly enough, The Ring was fucking horrifying when I saw it in theaters. But yeah, this was definitely like the scariest movie that I had seen in theaters at that time, and actually, I really still think it is. Holds up to this day. It's just so well done, and man, that spider crawl scene when I saw it in the theaters the first time scared the living fuck out of me. Oddly enough, though, too, when we talked about like what version we were watching this time, we both said like we'd watch the theatrical one. I know they have it on Max right now, so no spider crawl scene in that. No, which honestly, it's one of those things where it's like it's like I actually do kind of appreciate the theatrical, but that scene being cut out.
I feel like that scene should have stayed in the theatrical because it adds that little bit more of that horror element to actually what's going on, because Reagan for the entirety of the movie is confined to her bed. And so having that kind of spider crawl scene would have added like, oh shit, like she can get up anytime and kind of do her own thing. And yeah, it was early on in the possession, but still it would have added a little bit more of that horror element to it, especially because pretty much Ellen Burstyn's running around her house in the dark most of the time in this movie somehow.
Yeah, I know. It's it is weird too. And you think of it and like the horror feels very confined from like a visual standpoint or like a film goer standpoint to Reagan's room. Like we really don't. And I will say like there is something to that. There's something to like the dread of like as we're going in, like we don't know what we're walking into, but there's also something scary about having that actually come out now too.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, that scene scared the fuck out of me. But yeah, this is obviously one of the scariest movies of all time. Not a hot take there. But let's get into some of the pre-production of this. So looking at this, obviously, The Exorcist was a book written by William Peter Blatty, and he would actually go on to write the screenplay for the film as well. Blady was a pretty interesting guy, actually, when I was reading up on him. So full scholarship to Georgetown. After he scored the highest on their 7-hour entrance exam. Matt, would you ever take a 7-hour entrance exam
Absolutely
going into
not.
a school?
I can't even take like a 30-minute one. I don't have the attention span for this.
Yeah, that just sounds like a war of attrition right there. Like I would think students would just, or prospective students would just be getting up and being like, fuck this. But I don't know, maybe they were just trying to find the right people.
Yeah.
Definitely a way to weed out people, though, for sure, is just have people sit in a room for 7 hours straight. I mean, I just had my 10-hour plane ride last week, and let me tell you that's an experience and a half, and I'm sure you can attest to certain.
Yeah, because after a certain while, it's like you're confined to an area, and like we naturally want to get up and move around. I know I do. I'm ADHD. I can't just sit still for an hour, let alone 7.
Oh, what? Humans weren't meant to be in a tube for like up in the air for 10 hours straight. That's not something we were built for. Yeah, shocker right there. So in Blady's junior year, the Washington Post published an article about a 14-year-old Maryland boy who had been supposedly freed by a Catholic priest of possession by the devil. The piece described objects moving across the room on their own accord or of their own accord, the boy speaking in Latin and shouting obscenities, and neurologists and neighbors admitting to have witnessed the uncanny events. So this is sort of the inspiration for what would become The Exorcist. Blady remarked, I wasn't just impressed, I was excited. For here and at last in this city, in my time, was tangible evidence of transcendence. If there were demons, there were angels, probably a God, and a life everlasting. So obviously, William Peter Blatty has Catholic roots here, and this piece in the Washington Post affected him and became an inspiration. So this idea would sort of stick with him for years. Actually, he didn't get around to writing it until a little bit later. He had written other books and screenplays before, and eventually, he had a conversation with an interested editor at a New Year's Eve party and gave him a chance. Part of the reason with this idea is that nobody really gave him a chance because it was kind of a fucked up idea.
Right. I mean,
or at least for at the time.
Religion at this time was more held in a higher regard. It kind of really dominated a lot of things in everybody's daily lives. So to kind of bring up a movie that has this kind of, whatever around it, surrounding it, it's kind of a taboo to say the least. Yeah,
I would say it's, you worry about like what the populace would feel about this movie. And that's probably the concern of like some of the editors and people going into this, if they were going to publish this book. In his proposal, though, he wrote, the novel would ask what effect a confrontation with the undisputed paranormal phenomenon would have on the book's main characters. So that's a good way to start right there, is like, what's going to happen? Because you're really just focusing on the characters. In his research, though, through his Jesuit connections, Blady was able to contact one of the exorcists from the 1949 case that he read about in the Post. The priest had kept a detailed diary of the process of exorcising the boy. While he refused to give Blady out of concern for the privacy of those involved, the diary, Blady somehow got a hold of the copy of it through others. And he found it beyond any doubt the thoroughly, meticulously, and reliable, even cautiously understated eyewitness reports of paranormal phenomenon to be enlightening. So, yeah, he was pretty well researched. Obviously, when we're looking at the film now and what the final product ended up being, he changed names, ideas, places, everything like that to protect people that were involved with this. But, it really gave Blady the inspiration he needed to go forward with the book. And so The Exorcist came out in 1973. It had strong reviews. However, readers did not immediately take to the novel about an 11-year-old girl named Regan McNeil who was possessed by the devil. So wasn't as popular with readers. I don't know. Obviously, we're looking at a different time here in 1973 where reading was like it was much more popular of a way for people to get entertainment. Would you have gone for this like right away, Matt?
I mean, me personally, I have horror is like my favorite genre. So I would have personally, maybe in 1973, who knows what I'm doing at that point. Maybe I'm chasing the pink ladies around, but yeah, I personally probably would have, but I can see why it wouldn't have been, because at this time it's very much that nuclear family, right? You have your dad who goes to work all day, mom stays at home, maybe read some books. And it was kind of probably would have been frowned upon for, kids or a mom or anybody to be reading a book about a devil possessed 11-year-old girl. It's not something that you're just picking up and reading inside the house when there's other books out there that are less taboo.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously, reading is a form of entertainment and escapism. Funny you would say nuclear family being a part of that when there technically is no nuclear family to this, as we have a broken home in this story. Interesting that you'd say that. So yeah, readers did not immediately take this. This actually, like in life, like a lot of things do happen because of luck and happenstance. Basically, because of a guest cancellation on the Dick Cavett show, Blady was tagged to fill in, and the audience was enthralled by his comments on whether the devil exists on this book. Dick Cavett actually, didn't think that he would be a good guest, but eventually, they had somebody cancel and needed Blady to. 2 weeks later, Blady recalled in later interviews, the book was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It stayed there for 4 months and in the top 10 for more than a year. So ultimately, it sold more than 13 million copies in the United States alone. So we had an undeniable hit when it happened. And Blady had the idea of actually doing the movie pretty quickly after this. He did send this around, and Friedkin was sort of top of mind when it came to directors here. So yeah, a little bit about this. Blady wanted Friedkin considered, as well as others. Basically, Friedkin's The French Connection had come out prior to that, and Blady's comments on it was that the pace, the excitement, the look of the documentary realism of The French Connection, these were desperately needed in The Exorcist. And I think Blady had a really good handle on like exactly how to present his material so that it would be best for audience. It obviously helps that when you're going to sell this to studios, when you have a director attached to it who literally just did a movie that won 5 Oscars.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, including Best Picture and Best Director. So you've got a powerhouse on this hand. His movie, The French Connection, made a lot of money. Not nearly as much as this, but funny enough, Friedkin's main note about William Peter Blady's first draft of the film script, it was not faithful enough to his novel. He said, this is Blady's comments on Friedkin's notes. Billy wanted the sequences of the events to be exactly as they were in the novel. The Exorcist. So that's basically what he wrote. Even where the changes I'd made in the dialogue were only slight, Billy would cringe and ask that I keep the dialogue exactly the same. So he wanted to keep it as faithful as possible to the book. And I didn't read the book. I don't know if you've read the book.
I haven't read the book either.
Okay, so apparently it's one of the more faithful adaptations, and obviously Friedkin was Friedkin was a big part of this. So, but anyways, interesting note. Looking at some of the pre-production of this too, who else was considered? Stanley Kubrick.
That's right. Yep, I did know this one.
Yeah. So, interesting. Obviously, this is a Warner's project, and Stanley Kubrick works like for Warner's for years. So, but he passed on it. So, I just like to think about like what exactly would Kubrick's movie look like.
I almost feel like it would have been even more grotesque in a way. Even I feel like he would have really amped up the fear factor of it all and kind of gone a little bit further and pushed the envelope a little bit further. That's just knowing Stanley Kubrick and his films, which I don't know if that's something that would have worked with the story that was told, because it works as a very good slow burn type horror, or how it would have played out. But I often think about that too.
Yeah, you raised a good point. I don't know though, technically, if it would have gone that extra mile, like you say. So obviously we wouldn't have probably gotten a more faithful adaptation. But I mean, obviously Stanley Kubrick, he does adapt. A lot of his movies are adaptations of novels. Obviously, famously, The Shining. So when we look at a horror and what he's done with that, I question whether or not it would have been as faithful. But I will say, like, some of the filmmaking techniques that Kubrick uses, like when we're looking at The Shining, you know, some of those, the camera shots and how he moves the camera with the slow zooms and everything like that to maybe create this air of like being stalked or we're looking in on something, and just the overall creepy vibe. You see that a lot in The Shining too. So I do think, like, in that sense it would have been similar, but I also think Friedkin has this kineticness and rawness to his filmmaking that just Kubrick doesn't have. It's very much more polished. Right. And I think that that's what this film needed, was a little bit more of a raw, kinetic, documentary style feel to it.
Yeah, I think that actually definitely makes a lot of sense. And you're right. We wouldn't have gotten a straight adaptation that was wanted. And I feel like there would have been a lot more creative differences going on behind the scenes. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, moving on to some of the production notes here. So, famously, studio allocated about $3 million to this film. They went well beyond that budget, and it just came in at over 11 million. Yeah, totally. You know, sounds like just going to Target with my wife right there. You know,
I mean, that's even just shopping with me. I go anywhere, and it's like, this is fine. However, I'm going to spend money on Legos today or something stupid.
Is this, should we, you know, how obviously we've heard like girl math, boy math, this sort of thing. Is this just like movie making math right here?
It is. It definitely is.
It's definitely blockbuster math, right? That's for sure.
Yes.
Well, I mean, obviously this is going to happen. So you've got makeup artist, Dick Smith. He actually made a comment about this. So, his training actually, he goes on to say, my training, in television had been, quality for a low price. One of the lessons I learned, I dismissed out of hand doing something, saying it would be too costly, and good old Billy Friedkin would say, that's not your problem. So yeah, basically anytime you got somebody where it's like you've got maybe a makeup your makeup guy saying like, yeah, this is going to be a little too costly, and the director just being like, no, that's not your problem. Like,
don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the budget's going to increase just a little bit.
Yeah.
That, and when you're, you know, got to do 50 shots of throwing split piece soup at people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so that was one of the lessons. Friedkin also wanted the possessions to look as real as possible, and he hired mechanical genius Marcel Vacateur. So yeah, we actually had a pretty star-studded cast of makeup and special effects in this movie, and it really holds up pretty well, given the fact that, you know, if this movie were to be made today, a lot of this shit would be CGI.
Oh, first of all, so the pea soup is actually Anderson's pea soup mixed with oatmeal, and I guarantee you they probably would have CGI'd that a bit more. Like, it would not have worked in today's aspect, just because studios for some reason love CGIing things like blood when it's very easy to make that pretty cheaply. Just like, for example, Anderson's pea soup and oatmeal, that's pretty cheap and easy to get your hands on.
Yeah, I mean, they like you'd think, like, obviously certainly the split pea soup isn't going to make it go from you know, 3 million to 11 million, tripling the budget right there, over tripling the budget.
Yeah.
So yeah, something like that. But I just think, like, the fact that a lot of it it looks so good still because it's practical. I don't think, like, obviously think of like the movements that Reagan has, like, and during the possession scenes, like, you're not going to get that now.
Not at all.
We'll get into some of the problematic stuff of having your actors do some of these things and having your actress actually break her back during one of those scenes, which is pretty fucked up. So, so yeah, there's that delicate balance of like making it look amazing, but also protecting your actors and not harming them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're not obviously going to really turn Reagan's head all the way 360.
Oh, really? I mean, I was pretty sure
Actually,
that was happening.
Fun fact, there to this day, Linda Blair gets asked by fans if she can actually turn her head like that.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious with you. That's one of the things that she gets asked the most. Linda Blair to this day actually gets asked if she can legit make her head spin.
Wow.
People. I shouldn't be surprised, but I am.
Yeah, I mean, people are just really smart. This guy included too. And I'm pointing myself for those of you who can't see us. Many male stars in Hollywood at the time wanted to play the part of Father Karras, including Paul Newman and Jack Nicholson. But Blade and Friedkin wanted someone less well known. They didn't want like this to become a Jack Nicholson movie or a Paul Newman movie. So they really did kind of keep the casting a little bit more low key, and I think that was for the better. So they actually saw Jason Miller's play, and he ended up becoming Father Karras, but it was called That Championship Season, and wanted him for a screen test. Miller was a writer at the time, not an actor. So they just liked the look of him for the character. Ideally, I remember reading is like they wanted a priest who could act essentially in that role, but they did really good in getting Miller in this role because he's fantastic. Ellen Burstyn was actually a little bit of a tough sell for the studio at first. Jane Fonda was considered for this movie. Jane Fonda famously turning it down, telling her agent, "Why would any studio want to make that capitalist ripoff bullshit?" This coming from 80 for Brady lady over here.
That's what I'm saying. Like, hold on. First and foremost, how money eventually talks in the end.
Oh, dude, it was the 70s, man. It was a different time.
Down with the man. And then here she is making 80 for Brady and other shit like that. Like, come on.
Yeah, I know.
God bless.
We can call it the hypocrisy of that shit all day. But she did later apologize to Blady and clarified her position. She goes, "The reason I didn't want to do it is because I don't believe in magic." Which, that's whatever. Fair, that's a little bit more fair.
Yeah.
But anyways, Friedkin said he immediately knew during casting that Linda Blair was Reagan. So it looks like they found Reagan pretty quickly. And actually, her and Ellen Burstyn did have a good connection when they were doing screen tests as well. And Linda Blair even credits Ellen Burstyn to becoming like almost like a mother to her on set. So that's good to see. Almost a little bit of method acting there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
70s were a big time for that. So looking at some more of this production on set, Friedkin was considered both be God and devil, fighting to get very challenging shoot completed, but sometimes going to extremes. Regularly without warning, he would actually fire off gunshots during the shoot to scare actors and get the reactions that he wanted. So not the best way to do that.
So anyways,
but certainly
I just started blasting.
Yeah, just shooting blanks off during the set. I mean, I don't know, like that would scare the fuck out of me. I would not.
Oh, without a doubt.
So it was a little bit of like a contentious and troubled production in the sense that, Friedkin was really pushing the actors to the edge. Ellen Burstyn complained that she was actually getting pulled across the room too hard by the special effects supervisor, Marcel Vaucateur. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, let me know. Friedkin, Friedkin would say he instead he said he was going to fix it basically, but then went to Marcel. I'm just going to call him Marcel. And was like, pull her harder. And then pulled her harder that time. She was writhing in pain across the floor. That's the shot they ended up using for the movie. Again, pretty problematic. And to do that with your actors, like it's just a little messed up. But I mean, I don't know, Matt, like, do you feel like I'm going to be pulling you across the room during the production of these, or?
I can only hope so. I'm into it. Harder.
I mean, like we talked about the cross, obviously, I did send one to you via Amazon, but I next time what I'm probably going to do is start firing off blanks just to make sure that, you're paying attention.
When was your last desk pop?
Moving on here. This was considered, some of the hype around this film was also like about the quote unquote curse production of it.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. You read about this too, I'm assuming.
Yeah. They the curse was like a big thing that people still believe in, apparently. And I don't know if I actually believe it or not. It's kind of like that. What was it? The Brandon Lee family curse, like they're believed to be cursed as well. But there are some things like Ellen Burstyn suffered her spinal injury, but that was more due to like them whipping her around, I feel like. And
that was actually Linda Blair who suffered the spinal injury.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Yeah. Because that was during, the one scene where it's like that she's just being whipped in the bed. She's actually, she broke her back. So
yeah. And another scene was like basically while there was a screening in Rome, it was reported that a bolt of lightning struck a church opposite of the cinema. So one woman in America passed out during the movie, broke her jaw, and then later sued Warner Brothers. A lot of that kind of doesn't really sound like a curse as much as just happy accidents, in my opinion. But whatever you believe in, I guess.
I mean, let's be real here. This sort of publicity and word of mouth travels, and when you get it, people want to see what the hype about. So this really only helped them at the box office overall. But yeah, I mean, to your point, this was some of the stuff that just went on like when the movie was playing in theaters. A number of people, though, there were some weird deaths during production to people who were actually in the movie and connected with the movie. So basically, one of the persons that died during productions was Jack McCown, who plays Burke and whose character actually dies in the film. The night watchman, the person responsible for set refrigeration, died. The newborn baby of the assistant cameraman, the cast member Maximilian Sido's brother or Sido's, I apologize, and Linda Blair's grandfather passed away. The son of a cast member, Jason Miller, was also hit by a motorcycle on an empty beach and almost died. A carpenter lost a thumb, a technician or a lighting technician, a toe. One weekend, the set of the McNeil home caught fire when nobody was there. So little sus there, as the kids would say. And actually what's creepy about that one too is that the only part of the set that didn't burn was Reagan's bedroom. So I can understand why people
believed
they believed the hype of this potentially being a cursed set.
I get it. Yeah, no, you're right. I get it. Because, knowing me, if I was filming this movie and this started going on, I would 100% believe in curses. I mean, shit, I believe in sports superstitions. So who am I kidding?
Whoa. You believe in sports superstitions? So elaborate on this, please.
You got to wear the same jersey while you're sitting in the same spot. You got to do the same routine over and over, things like that. And I feel like if I wake up feeling too good about a game, that means my team's probably going to lose that day. All those kind of things.
So do you mean from a fan perspective, or are you talking more of like an athlete?
Yeah. No, kind of both, I guess. Like if as playing sports, like if I didn't follow a set routine, I feel like then it's just setting myself up for failure. But I guess kind of both.
Yeah, I mean that's totally fair. That comes in like with the routine thing. But yeah, man, I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious, to quote the great Michael Scott. Especially when it comes to sports superstitions, dude. I mean, famously, the Patriots came back 28-3 because at halftime I changed locations. I was watching the game with my parents down at I think it was like one of the social clubs that we were at, and then I was just like, you know what? I can't deal with this. And I was like, maybe change the location will help. And I went home because it was right down the street and ended up getting hammered by myself watching the game. And yeah, I got hammered off of wine too. Oh, let me tell you, Oh, dude, I may or may not have projectile vomited later that night or the next day. Still, one of the best Super Bowls ever. But yeah, that's sort of the story of the history of the production here.
I do have a couple more production things. So Mercedes McCambridge, who actually voiced the demon, would smoke cigarettes and then used a diet of raw eggs and whiskey, which helped her achieve the demonic voice.
I heard about this too, actually. And I got something to add to this. Basically, Friedkin tied her up to make, when they were recording this, to make her feel restrained. Yeah, man, it was fucked up, and it worked so well. Yeah. Talk about abusing your actors again.
Again, like the 70s were wild because I don't feel like you could actually get away with something like that today.
I mean, people, like, there are directors that still push them, like, whether it's, David Fincher doing 100+ takes and famously breaking Jake Gyllenhaal during the Zodiac.
That's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are ways to do it. Like, you're gonna get that, but like, yeah, not as bad. I mean, social media today, everybody having they'll grant like phones on set, like that sort of thing. That doesn't happen as much, but yeah, it was pretty fucked up.
The other note that I have is that Max von Sydow was literally only 44 years old when he filmed this, and it took 3 hours to actually age him up. And there were actually even on-set jokes that he was wearing more makeup than Linda Blair was while she was fully possessed. Yeah.
No, the makeup on this is amazing. And yeah, for Max von Sydow, or Sydow specifically, he just looks incredible. Though I will say this, when we're talking about some of the makeup guys on this, I believe I had mentioned his name earlier, but Dick Smith was a fucking legend as far as makeup goes. Want to hear some of his filmography real quick?
Yeah, hit us.
Let's do it. All right. So, and this is around the same time, but he'd been working, like, obviously since the 40s as a makeup artist. But let's just give you some of the ones around the time that The Exorcist came out, just to give you an idea of like this guy. He worked on The Godfather Part 2, and obviously similarly, it's probably what got him the role, because you think about The Godfather, they had to age up Brando at the same time too. Brando was not an old dude when he was playing Vito Corleone in The Godfather. So yeah, he ended up doing that. Worked on The Stepford Wives. He did makeup for The Taxi Driver. So a lot of great films during the 70s. Deer Hunter, Scanners, another good one for special effects and makeups consultant. So not only did they have Dick Smith on this too, but they also had for special effects, the man, the myth, the legend, as the special effects assistant in his young days, Rick Baker.
Ooh, I mean, that's quite the freaking, resume right there in itself.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like this is like, I mean, it's a fucking, this is like the 2018 like Warriors right here as far as like your special effects and makeup consultants go, as far as these three guys, and I'm saying three, but I'm throwing Marcel Vocateur in there, and then a young Rick Baker as well. So yeah, any other last comments before we move on to box office and critical reception?
No, hit us.
Let's do it. So box office, 193 million on its original release, Matt,
which for 1973 is pretty freaking crazy.
We're gonna play this game, and I just enjoy doing this in general with like anything. Me and my wife, like if I see something and like there's a number that pops up and it's like, say if I'm watching Seinfeld and they're like, oh, it's $100, and I'm doing in my math in my head, I'll go to my inflation calculator. I'm like, what's $100 in 1993? I
do that too. I love doing that.
Oh, dude. All right, glad we're on the same page on this. So because this movie came out in late December of 1973, I actually went to the inflation calculator and did it for what it was in 1974 dollars. Want to take a guess on how much that would be today?
Today, it's probably probably in the ballpark of 700 million.
Oh man, you're way off actually. It's more.
It's
Dude, this is over $1 billion, dude. These are Infinity War, Endgame, Avatar numbers.
Wow.
It's 1,204,000,000, just shy of actually 205.
Wow.
It's fucking nuts how much money this made. And like, let's put it in a context. This is a movie during the 70s, and it's actually, it's a rated R film too.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at some of the rated R films, this is actually, I believe this is one of 3 films in the top 15 for films that were rated R and came out during like the 20th century. When I was doing some research on this, and I'm going to pull up the numbers. All right. So when we are looking at the top 15 of rated R movies that came out and have the highest grossing, Matt, I'll let you take a guess. What do you think number 1 is? And this is obviously the top 15 overall. Only 3 of these movies are from the 20th century. So, every other movie is 2000 and beyond. So what do you think the top rated?
Like Deadpool is like the top rated or something like that.
It's a great guess. That's actually number 2. Number 1 is it's very similar to The Exorcist if we are to think about the religion aspect of it.
Man, I don't know. I can't.
Passion of the Christ.
Oh, that was rated R. Oh, I guess it was rated R. I don't know why I didn't even consider that. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it was such a phenomenon at the time, but it very much came and went. Didn't have that like staying power because obviously, had some issues. But care to take a guess at the top 3 or the 3 films from the 20th century that are in the top 15?
Well,
so we're talking
century. So we have The Exorcist. Man, I don't even know what was all rated R.
Exorcist comes in at number 12, by the way. And it's by far the oldest movie on the list. And so just to give you guys some context on that.
Was Terminator rated R? No, rated R.
Terminator 2 was, but that's actually a little further down at the 21 spot.
Man, I have no idea. I don't even know what they could be. I don't even remember what rated R movies came out in the 20th century that would have fit.
Okay. I would say think late 1990s and think of like a war film.
Oh, Saving Private Ryan?
Correct. Yeah, that's at number 15.
Oh, that would be rated R. I don't know why in my head that one's not rated R, but it gets pretty gruesome at times. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the other one's actually just ahead of The Exorcist. In the 11th spot. It's an 80s film. It's a comedy.
80s film comedy. Animal House?
No, that was actually a 70s film.
Yeah, that's 70s. You're right.
So it's Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Old Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, good old. I mean, it was obviously Beverly Hills Cop's a phenomenal movie. So, but yeah, man, crazy. And you just consider the context of how big of a phenomenon this is. I mean, I would argue that this had a bigger impact than Passion and was more impactful for religion than Passion of the Christ. I mean, yeah. I don't know. Would you?
I would agree.
Yeah, it's just had more staying power over time. The Passion sort of came and went.
It did.
And
The Passion was a very divisive movie still, but I feel like this movie, The Exorcist, was far.
Obviously, like when you look at the numbers too, like just how much it made, over 200 million, and this was 30 years before The Passion came out too.
Right. So
critical reception. Pauline Kael famously hated this movie, the great critic Pauline Kael. This is what she had said. The movie may be in the worst imaginable taste, that is that is an utterly unfeeling movie about miracles. But it's also the biggest recruiting poster for the Catholic Church. Biggest recruiting poster the Catholic Church has had since sunnier days of Going My Way and The Bells of St. Mary's. I can't disagree with that take on it. At the very least, that it's a big recruiting poster.
Oh, it definitely is.
But I mean, Pauline Kael, I love her as a critic, but she definitely missed the boat on this. Roger Ebert, though, big fan, 4 stars. The Exorcist is one of the best movies of its type ever made. It not only transcends the genre of terror, horror, and supernatural, but it transcends such serious ambitious efforts in the same direction as Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. Carl Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc is a greater film, but of course not nearly so willing to exploit the ways films can manipulate feelings. So good take on this by Raj. He definitely understood what it was about. When we're looking at Oscars here, so we've got a bunch of nominations. Nominated for Best Picture in 74. Ellen Burstyn was nominated for Best Actress. Jason Miller nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role. Linda Blair also nominated for an Oscar in 1974 for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. Friedkin was nominated for Best Director. The real winner of this, though, was obviously William Peter Blatty, who's Best Writing Screenplay based off material from another medium, because it was an adaptation of his own book. So also winner, care to take a guess what the other category it won in was?
Ooh, was it? Did you already said makeup, right?
No, I did not say makeup.
That would be my guess.
I don't know if that was a category then.
If it wasn't, then would it be? Well, was sound a category?
Yep. Yeah. Bingo. Sound.
So, okay. Because they do some really cool things with the way they do sound.
Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite parts, and one of the, along with the makeup and special effects, one of the great ones. Actually, that you know what, that just reminded me. I think special effects and makeup, the first year that became an Oscars category, was for Rick Baker in his famous work in, care to guess which movie? American Werewolf in London.
Oh, that would make a lot of sense. That would.
Sense. Definitely some connection there. But anyways, it was also nominated for cinematography, art direction / set direction, and film editing. I'd say sound and writing was definitely
strong,
worthy of winning that.
Yeah.
And I didn't take a look at the 1974 Oscars to see what we could do with this one, but my feeling is that Ellen Burstyn and Linda Blair didn't win, that is probably a stacked year in 1974. And just knowing the 70s in general, they had some pretty stacked years.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All right, let's get into the takes that we have for this movie. The one take that I have is that this movie is probably the most important movie in the shaping of modern cinema. And I'll tell you why. Because without this movie, we don't have Jaws. And without Jaws, modern movies wouldn't exist today, especially the modern blockbuster.
Yeah, that's kind of what my thoughts are, because it feels like this movie's do more with less. I think in the aspect of some of the iconic shots you think of, it's the way the lighting and the special effects that are used. And this kind of shows you the depth that we really could do makeup and special effects and things like that. And I feel like from this point on is when movies really started to do more of that kind of stuff and take more risks, because it's like the way that Star Wars kind of also showed that you can do special effects, in which I think we don't have Star Wars without kind of The Exorcist at the same breath, or like Indiana Jones, because again, it shows you practically that we can really do some of the stuff that we do makeup wise and other things like that. And so that's why it really sets the tone for movies going forward.
Well, and obviously the big thing driving, what's going to make films for studios is the money aspect too.
Yeah.
This movie, even though it was, tripled its original budget, made it was a fucking powerhouse for a rated R film. And yeah, to your point about Star Wars too, I would say just from a box office perspective, that's what sort of keyed in, I think,
well, it lets studios take more risks, I think.
Yeah, well, the producers,
people will show up.
It definitely did. And this was like obviously early 70s, 60s, like this is sort of the beginning of the post Hays Code era for films and for the studios. So they were famously trying to push the limit. Part of like what that was, you have these exploitation films that would come out, and those exploitation films would really push the limits. I mean, obviously, you were looking at like Texas Chainsaw Massacre around this time too. Last House on the Left, those sort of films, but those are B movies. Like they're not big budget studio movies. This was. There's rumors that obviously that Warner's probably bribed the MPAA to get the rated R rating and keep that crucifix scene in there. Because I mean, like, how do you get that in there is sort of the big
You're
question.
towing the line of NC-17 back in this time period with that scene alone right there.
NC-17 didn't exist yet.
That's
actually.
true. That's a very good point. That is a very good point.
It would have been an X rating.
Yeah.
And obviously no studio is going to go for that because it's box office nightmare. So, it's one of those rumors that they probably did do something like that.
I would
obviously
be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, we can't say that they did, but there's always sort of these trade-offs that they have.
Yeah.
But my point being about this really driving modern cinema into Jaws. So let's take a look at like what The Exorcist was at its core. It was a book that became a movie pretty quickly. It was a big page turner, big hit as a book. Let's think about like exactly what Jaws was too. And it showed us that, okay, like these page turner novels that people flock to, we can take them and turn them into really good films and also capitalize on a lot of money on them too. And so I think what this did was made studios acutely aware of what's out there as far as books, the public consciousness of that. Let's make sure we get on that, get the rights to those pretty quickly and move to get those into production. Obviously with Jaws, then you have like the different way the movie's distributed, like creating the blockbuster. It wasn't the way films were distributed pre-Jaws, they weren't wide releases like that movie was. So, the producers definitely took it a different angle to capitalize on the money that they could at the time. But I think that this showed that there's just so much to be made out there. And if we are going to, entice the public or to come to the cinemas, like we're going to need some material like this that they're interested in seeing a screen adaptation of.
Yeah. Agreed.
So yeah, that's my hot take in the movie. You got any more hot takes, Matt?
No, I think we can roll into some of our personal awards.
Let's do it. So the awards section, let's dive into it. Best scene. There's a few nominees for this. What do you got for your first nominee?
I mean, for me, my favorite is obviously when she first throws up in Karras's face because of the fact that like he was told it was only going to hit him in the chest and it ends up getting him in the face and everything. And so this was a genuine reaction and it only took one take for them to film because of this. So that's mine, with the number two being when she walks downstairs and just pisses all over the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where like the movie really takes off. Like when you look at it, it's that scene from like the party going into, when she walks in and looks at the astronaut, you're going to die up there and pisses. Sidebar, maybe we should like potentially play like a little clip from that too.
Yeah. Well, I can do that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we could like introduce some clips and make notes of it. All right, cool. Yeah, I had that as one of better scenes. I also do like the scene after that where the bed shaking scene. So the initial one where Chris McNeil comes up and Reagan's on the bed and it's shaking and it's obviously like something is going wrong here. That leading into the dream sequence of when Father Karras is drunk, gets put to bed and has that weird dream sequence that always fucking freaked me out. It's just that 70s style of filmmaking that I love, where it's like, it's those long shots and it feels very dreamy.
It's like suspenseful. It was too.
Really cool.
Kind of draws into the suspense and builds on that tone.
Yeah, I mean, what also like the editing too, like when those little flashes you get of like Pazuzu the demon, like the face, it fucking freaked me out.
It still does to this day.
Yeah, I think like the lights flickering scene, like those are the things of the movie that I think can be the scariest. Like obviously we're going into shock and awe with like things like the crucifix masturbation shit. Mm-hmm. And it is still shocking to this day, but the lights flickering thing is a really good one. Also, I love the beginning of the movie in Iraq. I don't know how you feel about it.
I mean, it kind of sets the tone, right? You get this ominous, and he's just like out there, and it's kind of his call to action in a way.
Yeah, it's just there's something about the tone of it, and this is where I think the sound production just shows. And obviously, they shot this on set in Iraq.
Yeah, they were actually in Mosul at this time.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I love most about it, is that it was actually there. And it's just the way it's set up, like the way they utilize sound, they have like this almost rhythmic sound aspect when they're, everybody's got the pickaxe and they're doing the archaeological dig. It's soothing. It kind of gets you into it. And then it's almost like sound drops, and then you're just sort of listening into maybe a thing that happens. There's a rhythmicness about, actually, I forgot when they're doing the blacksmith on the stone, or the anvil, I should say. They're all hammering away at that, and I actually, I really like the way it flows and feels. Yeah. And I think it sets the tone. Stephanie, I was watching with her last night, my wife, and she's like, why did they like keep this in the movie? And I just was like, I was like, well, listen, idea. They technically couldn't. From a story perspective, it's not there. However, the story is the movie. This is the movie right there. Like it is that confrontation with Pazuzu. Like at the end of it, you're sort of building to it. So I always think the good movies kind of have like a little show in the beginning of that. And I wish movies would do something like this more often.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of actually looking at it. You're right. It's something that they've gotten away from for sure in the modern cinema aspect.
Yeah, I mean, our modern audiences aren't as patient, I think, but the ones that are just will fucking love you for doing something like this, myself included. I have to say, like, I think the best scene, I mean, obviously, we can talk about the crucifix scene. Do you think that's one of the best scenes, or?
It's certainly the most shocking scene, I would say, because it kind of comes out of nowhere and you're not ready for it, especially on like a first watch.
Yeah, it's so shocking. It is a really good scene overall, though, too. It's just like it's shocking, and it just leads up to like so much. We're really going for it at that point. Like it keeps building upon itself. So yeah, I think that's considered. I also just think like the last 20 minutes when we get to the point of Marin arriving at the house, the famous shot, and that's on my t-shirt right here. I think that's probably the best in the movie is the end, like when we're getting it into the the whole exorcism scene. Looking at the next award, what aged the best? So what aged the best for you, Matt?
Without a doubt, what aged the best was the special effects. I mean, just through and through, the special effects in this movie hold up even by 2023 standards. The makeup, the way that they slowly transition Reagan into being fully possessed, and just all of that. It's you're shooting on location between DC, between Iraq, all of that stuff. That is just all authentic. And then, of course, just a lot of the raw emotions and the way that they just, again, the special effects, the makeup, that's all to me is without a doubt what aged the best.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I feel like the special effects and the makeup, having a young Rick Baker and Dick Smith on it, like it holds up. We talked about it before, but I think the opening scene still really holds up to set the mood and the tone.
Agreed.
But yeah, shooting on location. One of the things I love best about it is that this isn't a movie where it's filmed in Canada like it would be today, and they're trying to pass it off as Georgetown. Like
Right.
It's there. It feels very much like Georgetown. You just feel like you're transported actually into that world because it's shot on location. The same thing with filming in Iraq, which they did go through some troubles with because, there were some, they didn't want the U.S. filming there. So I believe they had to use an all British crew for shooting over there. I also think, can I just say this, that the crucifix scene did age the best as far as like the shock and brutality of it?
Yeah. Even knowing it's coming, you're still not fully prepared when it actually does come.
Dude, I still to this day will just cringe up, and not cringing like, oh my God, like this looks so bad. No, cringing in the fact that I'm like, this is fucking terrifying. And like, it's so stomach churning, and it's so effective today. And granted, like I would say this, like it's not something that you're gonna see in modern movies today. Like they definitely, you want to talk about slipping one past the MPAA, this is it. Like this is the one. But it's just, oh man, it does age really well if you want to put into like how shocking it still is even to this day.
Absolutely.
Her voice, Reagan's voice, I think the idea of having another actor do Reagan's voice instead of Linda Blair.
It was smart. I mean, it was a really smart play. You can't have Reagan try to change her voice up. It just would not have worked the way that they wanted it to.
Yeah, you look at some of the directors' commentators. Obviously, like Linda Blair is saying it during those times, and that's what makes it look well. Right. But I mean, when you look at it, like they obviously have to do this in post production. So Linda Blair's like physical acting matches just really perfectly with the voice actress. And forgive me because I don't have her name up here too, and I probably should.
Voice actress is Mercedes McCambridge.
Yes, that's right. I did have it on my notes. Demon voice Mercedes McCambridge. But yeah, that's what would you say out of those aged the best? You think it's the special effects?
I still think it's special effects. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we didn't touch on was the performances overall. Like there's not a bad performance in this movie.
There's really not, but my standout performance without a doubt is Linda Blair. Like for an 11-year-old girl to go in there and just handle business the way that she does in this movie, Linda Blair by far the standout performance of the movie for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that she's probably, I mean, it's her, Ellen Burstyn, like take your pick of who's the standout performance. Like, and that's, by the way, that's our next category was standout performance. Actually, we skipped one though. What age the worst?
I mean, it was the techniques, obviously, that were used. You can't jerk your actors and actresses around, tie them down, all that kind of stuff. That was by far doesn't age the best of whatsoever.
No, definitely not. It was probably more accepted during the 70s. But when we look at it today, like it's did not age well. Could we say like the crucifixion scene could also be like what aged the best and aged the worst?
It could go both ways without a doubt. Yeah.
I don't know about that. That's a little inconsistent, but I mean, I think it actually we're not touching that as what aged the worst. That's what aged. That's one of the what aged the best. But yeah, I would agree with you. Like some of the techniques employed by Friedkin to get his actors to react the way they wanted could be a little abusive. So, you know, I mean, it's one of those things. Hey, like you get that battle of like you want to put out the best art you can when you are a director, and I completely understand that and that incentive, but you have to make sure that, you know, your actors are doing well too, and not, you know, you're not abusing them in any way. Yep. So but yeah, going back to standout performances. So your vote is for Linda Blair as Reagan, you think?
Absolutely.
I mean, I can't really disagree with it. Like she's a powerhouse, and this movie made her a fucking star.
Yeah, she launched from this point on.
Yeah, and honestly, like it's one of those things. Like she didn't do much after this, but like it did make her a star in the public consciousness, and like that's what she became. For me, actually, it's Ellen Burstyn. Her as Chris, like Chris McNeil is just, I think she's fantastic in this role. You know, and she's had a lot of great roles, obviously, you know, famously in Requiem for a Dream as well. I think she's good in that, but to me, this is her best. They
play off each other so well too. They
do.
Without having one as strong as the other was, I don't think, you know, if you only had, say, Ellen Burstyn be the standout, and Linda Blair didn't carry her weight, then it wouldn't have worked as well as this movie did. But I think having them both be absolutely as stellar as they were, I mean, they kind of are seamless, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, they really fed off each other. Yeah. All right, award pound for pound. Who's got the best performance with limited time?
I would say Father Karras, man. Not only is he out here pound for pound in those punching bags, but I do think that the crisis of faith that he kind of goes through, dealing with his struggles that he does and being tempted through his mother, I think with the limited screen time that he has, I would pick him.
I mean, I would say, does he qualify though for pound, because he's in the movie a lot, and like it really is like.
Okay, you're right. So then it's by far Father Merrin who comes in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah,
his 5 minutes of screen time really sells it.
He gets the exorcism and the beginning, and to me, those are my two favorite scenes in the whole movie. And it's a testament to him. Like he's playing this 80-year-old priest. Feeble priest at a 40-something-year-old man, and I honestly thought, I'm like, has Max von Sydow just been like the same age for the past like 50 years? Like,
literally all I thought vampire? Of, because he's the three-eyed raven. He's in Force Awakens. Like he's looked the same age since this fucking movie came out, and that's just another testament to practical of how they did a great job like aging him, because I hadn't really seen him in anything since The Exorcist until those shows and movies, and where he just looked the same.
Yeah, and I mean, like he's a powerhouse of an actor, though. The physical acting as well. He just, I even without speaking much in this role, he just convinces me so much of like what he's going through his facial expression. It's a powerhouse. So that's who I think, you know, pound for pound is doing the most here with the least,
without a doubt.
Award for music moment. This obviously isn't like a Scorsese film that where we have like, you know, just beat after beat going. You know, obviously they've got really like one song that's playing that's more of like a poppy song and Rambling Man. And it comes at actually a great scene during the crisis of faith, and I think that's sort of a good music moment. But for me, it's got to be the first time you hear Tubular Bells.
It is. It's the iconic sound, and that's what it is. For me, like that's the best music moment because it adds to that spooky factor of it, the whole thing, the mystique almost. Yeah,
it's, you know, you can see in a moment like that, in that scene, how even a movie like Halloween was influenced by The Exorcist, because you've got the shot set up too during this scene. So first off, it's around Halloween. You've got kids running down the street in costume. You're sort of following Chris McNeil, her character, kind of the way Michael follows Tommy Doyle when he like is following him out of school. It's almost, if you look at those shots side by side, like they're very, very similar, clearly influenced by it. And they're both stalking. So it's almost like it gives you this vibe that something is stalking her too. And you can tell John Carpenter was definitely influenced by the way they set that up. And it's iconic. Obviously, you think of Halloween, you think of the music from that, and you think of The Exorcist. Like it's one of those scores that instantly recognizable. You hear Tubular Bells, you're going to know that this is The Exorcist. So yeah, I think without a doubt, that's the best. All right, last one. Who wins the day? Who's if we're giving it, who won this movie?
It's my star, Linda Blair, by far. I think she wins the day. This was kind of her first on-screen presence, and she nails it, especially with what she had to do and the slow transition from this innocent girl into this fully possessed demonic creature, and then at the end back to that innocent little girl. Like the range that she shows in this movie, I personally believe she wins this film for me.
I can't really disagree with that. I mean, the only thing I'll say is like, what about Freakin'?
Yeah, I mean, as far as, directing goes, that could be a very big argument. If we're looking at it from that standpoint, yeah, I can't argue with that one either. You could really go either way.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like giving it to Freakin' is sort of like, okay, he was in charge of this project. He also did some really shitty things to get his actors to do some things.
The only reason why I can't fully be like, all right. Yeah,
and I totally get that. It's kind of like giving Bill Belichick the Super Bowl after Spygate. They didn't win that though. And you know what? Freakin' didn't win Best Director this year either. So much to my dismay, being a Patriots fan, they did not win that year. But anyways, yeah, I can see it because it's like, obviously he did some kind of cheap and dirty shit to get the film that he wanted. And you want that. But at the same time, I'm so happy with the overall product that it's like, yeah, I love this film so much. So I got to give it to my man. I'm a director guy. I got to give it to Friedkin.
Yeah, that's fair.
He really just like this movie. This would not be what it is without him. But you could say the same thing about Linda Blair.
Absolutely. Again, it can go really either way. I fully agree with that.
Awesome. Well, we've reached the end of our discussion here about The Exorcist. This is the end of our inaugural episode, but however, we do have another one coming up. And I'm going to give you a little glimpse of what it's going to be. So I'm actually, Matt, weekend plans. I think I mentioned this to you the other day. The movie I'm going to see tonight is Killers of the Flower Moon, and I am beyond pumped to go see that this weekend.
Yeah, Scorsese's back. Leo's back. It's one of the more hyped movies of the year, actually. It's been very, very hyped up, and pretty excited for this one.
Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, obviously very, very high critical reception, or just a great critical reception so far. Very highly rated on Rotten Tomatoes. Take that for what you will. But really excited to see it. So because we're doing Killers of the Flower Moon, though, and also because it is the 10-year, we passed the 10-year anniversary of this film coming out, I can think of no better time to talk about one of Marty's other great films, and I'd say Leo's best performance, and we'll talk about it next week. This is going to be the great Wolf of Wall Street. So we'll be looking forward to talking about that film next.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped. Like I said, any reason I get to talk about Margot Robbie.
Wow. Barbie herself before she was Barbie. Well, that leaves it for us here at The Real Buffs. Please, if you are a fan of the pod, please share, like, subscribe, give us a review on Spotify, iTunes. It's really going to help us to grow this out the way we want to grow this out. And please interact with us too. We're starting to launch our TikTok and our Instagram. So any social media participation is going to be helpful for us. We want to interact with you guys as well too. So great show today. great inaugural episode. I've said that word too much and I've struggled with it too much. So I'm going to stop saying it. Thank God the first episode's over. But have a great day, everybody. And we will see you soon.
Peace.